I'm sure they could hear me. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 6 o'clock and time to start our meeting this evening. I'm Councillor Pam Posnett, Chair of Planning. Members are reminded that we'll be using the audio-visual system this evening, and the meeting will also be streamed live on YouTube. Please put your phone onto silent during this meeting. If members wish to speak, can they please raise their hands and speak directly into the microphone in front of you. Remember to turn it off once you've finished speaking. Members voting will be by a show of raised hands. I will now provide a reminder of the evacuation procedure. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits around the sides of the chamber. Please assemble at the far side of the front car park, nearest to the park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist anyone who needs any assistance. I would like to introduce those present. On my right, I have Councillor Brown, Councillor Chandler, Douglas, Holmes, Illingworth, Pritchett and Smith. On my left, I have Cllr Steadman, Councillor Wood. Thank you very much indeed for your attendance tonight. We have a team of officers present who are, to my left is the Assistant Director for Planning and Delivery, Jim Worley, Planning Development Manager, Louise Parker, and Senior Planning Officer, Richard Redford. To my right is the Planning Solicitor, Tom Pickwell. We also have our Democratic Services team present, assisting with the technology and taking the minutes. And they are Adam Green and Sarah Evans. I haven't received any apologies for absence. I note Mr. Webster is not with us yet, but he's probably travelling from work. He doesn't work locally all the time, so he may join us later. Minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of January 2022. You've all seen the minutes, read them? Are there any issues at all with the minutes? Right, thank you. So can I have a proposer, please, for the minutes? Councillor Steadman, and a seconder, Councillor Chandler. Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest? Members to declare any interest is appropriate in respect of items to be considered at the meeting. The schedule of the applications is tonight. We only have one application to look at, and that is application 21/00834/FUL, Meadow Cottage, 37 New Road, Burton Lazars. We have 3 speakers tonight. Sorry? Yeah, I know. We have 3 speakers tonight, but first of all, before I call them to the podium, I'd like to introduce Richard, who's the planning officer, who will be giving us the report on this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. If we go through the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation first, for reference. So on this first slide, you can see the area outlined in red, which constitutes the application site. And you can see that at the moment, there is a black line running diagonally through the site from the, that separates the house on the right-hand side of that line with the area of pasture paddock land on the left. But both parts form the application site in this instance, and the land beyond it in blue as land the applicant controls. Now moving to the next slide. This shows the proposed site layout. So we can see the access coming in off the road to serve the proposed dwelling as well as Lynn Cottage. And off that access, the detached garage and the proposed dwelling with parking in front of both, and the garden area. Now the next slide shows the proposed ground floor layout on the left and the first floor on the right. So we can see at first floor, there are 3 bedrooms whilst at ground floor, you've got the kitchen dining room and the lounge area. The next slide shows the 4 elevations proposed, with the top left being the front. So that's what you will see from the street scene. And the elevation below it being that visible straight towards the rear of the site. And the 2 drawings on the right-hand side being the sides of the dwelling as proposed. Now, the next slide shows the garage. So you can see it's a double garage with a dual pitched roof. Now, the next slide is here for reference. Now, there, as set out in the agenda report, there is a neighbourhood plan, albeit at a very early stage in its process. Within that, the areas highlighted green are identified at this initial stage as being areas identified that would be like that the parish and the residents would like to be clearly marked and adopted as key green spaces in the village. But obviously, as already indicated, that neighbourhood plan is at an early stage and carries limited weight. Now, the next slide is the final slide. Now, this shows the elevations of the neighbour known as the old school. Now, they are there to make sure that all members, for those who've been on site and for those that haven't, to give members an idea of what one of the neighbours looks like. So when that is assessed, looked at alongside drawing the slide number 5, which shows the proposed elevations, you'll see the relative similarities between the proposal and the existing dwelling next door. So moving to the main agenda report, the application is as set out in the main agenda, namely the demolition of the existing dwelling and outbuilding and the subsequent erection of this 3-bedroom dwelling, which is a replacement for that to be demolished. And obviously alongside that, there will be the detached garage proposed. The main issues for consideration are as set out in the report, and in respect of the principle, from the planning perspective, one of the key issues is the fact that the proposal is a replacement as opposed to an additional dwelling in the village. So it's not like we're knocking one down and putting 2 up. It is literally 1 for 1. The number of dwellings in the village will not change as a result of this development. It's still this number as is at the moment, albeit it will have 3 bedrooms instead of 2. On that basis, officers consider it to be an exception that is acceptable in the village as per policy SS3 and C5, I think it is. But from a principal perspective, officers are satisfied it is acceptable. In terms of the character and design, officers, for the reasons set out in the agenda, also consider that they are acceptable. We are satisfied that the siting of the dwelling in the site proposed, in officers' view, results in an improvement for neighbour residents while still contributing to maintaining an open feel in the area from what can be seen at present, which is relatively limited by virtue of the substantial hedging that exists at the site. With regards to heritage assets, as also set out in the report, officers are of the opinion that the proposal will not impact adversely at a level that would justify a refusal being issued, whilst from a highway perspective, the parking spaces provided meet the required levels, which is always good. And also, I just want to check something, so apologies for this. from the highways perspective, we are satisfied that on the basis of the amended plans provided following highway authority comments, they are satisfied that the highway and pedestrian side of the development is acceptable and would not impact on highway or pedestrian safety. Ecologically, as per the report, the county have got no objections. The third-party objections are as set out in the agenda as well. Nothing further has been added to our knowledge in terms of additional representations. Whilst the points are noted, officers consider that the body of the report addresses the relevant material considerations, and on that basis, the application is recommended for approval as per the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Richard. Are there any questions for Richard? Councillor Pritchett.
Thank you very much for your report, Richard. I couldn't quite see on the diagrams on the portal, and it could be me, how much of the paddock is being taken up with this development. In other words, how much of the paddock next to the existing plot and fence is being taken up.
Presentation. Thank you. So it's the third. That's the one. Thank you. Hopefully, if you look at the screen behind you, Councillor, you may be able to see it closer. You can see at the back of the site where the red line makes the zig, as though you're making a Z. The boundary between the existing site and the paddock follows that small section of the Z as is. So I would estimate you're probably looking at just over a third of the proposed dwelling is in that paddock area, but that's a bit of a guess in terms of because I don't know the precise amount, I'm afraid.
No, I think the question I'm asking is that the current building is fenced around. The paddock is fenced. The paddock around the existing building is fenced. Does that fence come down, and do we have to use any of the new paddock, any of the paddock, to provide this building?
Yes.
How much? That's what the question is. 3 feet, 6 feet, 10 feet?
Well, my understanding from looking at that plan.
Can I just let Mr. Worley in now, please?
Have you seen the dotted line on it, Rich? Yeah. So I was going to make a point Rich has already
Okay, he was just clarifying something with the officer. Thank you.
So yeah, the dotted line cutting through that plan shows where the existing boundary is. Could I give you a definitive floor area of how much is going on? No, is the honest answer. But I think that drawing will give you a good understanding, hopefully.
Right. So as I look at it here, on the right of the dotted line is where the existing building is, right? And so the left of the dotted line is new. It's taking up a new area of green space, right? Thank you. That's what the one question I wanted to clarify. The other question I wanted to clarify is that once we built the house, there's 3 things here. It appears to me, can you correct me, please, that they are left with about a 9 feet strip of patio for the garden. Yeah, 9-10 feet. So to enjoy it further, what my next question is, and I don't know how much is relevant tonight, but had the application come in with a change of use of some of the paddock to garden, would that have been a problem? And is there anything that could be considered tonight in relation to a second later application? I don't know whether I've explained myself well there.
My understanding is that by virtue of the application and the dwelling
Mhm.
covering the existing curtilage, residential curtilage, and the paddock, the change of use of that paddock land to residential forms part of the proposal for the whole paddock area. Does that, am I making myself clear?
Yeah, so you're halfway there to having another building or outbuildings or a garden use of the paddock.
In theory, yes, should permission be approved, that could happen, although obviously should permission be approved, should members consider that the provision of additional outbuildings or extensions to the dwelling would or could have impact, there would be scope for the removal of permitted development rights and thus remove that from that possibility from taking place.
Right. The third question is on page, I'll just get it here. It's one of the conditions. It's paragraph 2 of the conditions on page 22. Oh, sorry, paragraph 3 on page 22. It talks about the external materials. I found reference to green windows. Right. I couldn't quite find a reference to exactly what type of boarding it would be. You know, would it be varnished looking like teak, or would it be weatherboard, tannalized to weather down? And the type of bricks. I didn't know whether they were just plain red bricks, green bricks, or something that would actually match the cottage next door. I couldn't quite, so in the papers, I couldn't quite find it. So the condition would just allow them to put wood on and use bricks.
Right, I'm looking at section 7 of the application form, which is on the website, which deals with materials. Now, in terms of the walls, it states timber cladding and brick. The roof would be slate. The windows would be wood style UPVC. The doors would be painted wood. So that would be the external materials of the building. Now I'm just going to have a quick look at the elevations to see whether there's any annotations. There's no details beyond the use of timber cladding and bricks on the drawings, although obviously if members are minded to approve but materials are an issue and you want more clarification on those, should you see fit, there could be scope for that condition to be varied to say details to be submitted and approved by the council prior to above ground work.
I mean, things like a retro barn stock wood and rustic wood would actually fit in with the area. So just bricks and wood doesn't seem to. Anyway, I've asked my 3 questions. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, don't worry. Richard, of course, you won't have not been here very long, so you don't know about Lynn Cottage and how very old it is. I think it's 16th century. And of course, it has a lot of stone. And that was a fight to get that built up again. Anyway, what I'm really asking about is the entrance to it. And then you've got another little line that goes into the field. So you've got like the road into it, haven't you? And then this other little line goes through it into the field. Is that right?
Yes, I believe that's the right of way.
That's the right of way. So the right of way, this is what I was concerned about. I've been to look at this several times. And so the right of way is actually a right of way, not just for this house, but it is for the field, etc.
My understanding is that it's a public right of way, so it's for all and sundry to use. Obviously, it allows access into the field and beyond on the footpath network.
The footpath, but you're making this into a road.
But the footpath will continue to be there alongside the road.
But right, I see. I just wondered if there might be conflict or something. But anyway, that's all really that I was asking, and probably go on from the other councillor. If there was room for another house to be built, then it wouldn't have any way of getting out, would it? Because this is a footpath, and would that make a difference? I don't know.
Sorry, if there were to be any other schemes for a house in the future, obviously that would be subject of consultations with like the highway from the highway perspective then.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Councillor Chandler.
Could we have the previous slide back on, please, Adam? Yeah, that's the one. Thank you. Can you confirm for me, Richard, that everything within that red line is under the ownership of the applicant?
On the application forms we have, they've signed certificate A, which from the planning perspective says that it's in their control, their ownership. If someone else had ownership of it or right of way, they'd have to serve notice. But on the basis of certificate A, we are working on the basis that it is their ownership, yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any more questions, anybody? No, fine, thank you. I would just like to say before we move on that I omitted to mention that as soon as Richard started his presentation, Councillor Webster did join us in the meeting. So just so that you're aware of that. I'd now like, for the benefit of the people on YouTube, that is, I would like now to call Councillor Tim Blewett, who's a member of Burton and Dalby Parish Council. If you can join us at the table, please. You know how to put the microphone on, do you, Councillor Blewett? Just press the face. You'll have three minutes and 30 seconds before the end. Our solicitor will draw your attention to the fact.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me to speak. In representing Burton and Dalby Parish Council, I ask you to defer the decision on this planning application order for a more sympathetic proposal to be brought forward. The Parish Council welcomes the use of the Burton and Dalby neighbourhood plan by the planning officers in reviewing the application by the developer, even though it is at submission stage. In turn, we want to work with the planning officers and the developers to ensure that the plans are altered to create a 2-bedroom bungalow, which is sympathetic to the character of the area in which it is going to be set, so that it abides by local plan policy EN6. The Parish Council also requests that any planning permission be granted on the basis that the development fulfills the neighbourhood plan policy B&D 16 and is designated an affordable first home. This would take note of the desire to see affordable housing as defined in the National Planning Policy Framework. Such a move would also be supported by the local plan policy C2, which looks for a better mix of housing. So let us now turn to the housing need itself. In the 2020 questionnaire survey that was carried out by the Parish Council to determine the housing needs of those who live in Burton Lazars, it was found that 9 households expected that they would need to move within the parish over the next 10 years. 6 of them were people wanting to move out of their parental home. Of those 9 households, almost all wanted 2-bedroomed homes. The desire to see a 2-bedroom affordable bungalow built on this site therefore fits with the policy B&D 16, which states that any windfall development such as this shall have 2 bedrooms and be of a design and size that meets the identified local need. Local policy SS3 and be an affordable first home in line with local policy C5. Turning now to the proposed development. As it currently stands, the proposed development will sit uncomfortably between 2 locally listed heritage assets, Old School House and Lynn Cottage. We seek to protect these 2 precious buildings by preventing the proposed development from having a major detrimental impact upon them. The proposed development should contribute positively to the space within which it is set, local plan policy D1. The National Planning Policy Framework calls for developments to be sympathetic to local character and history, including the surrounding building environment. The proposal before us does not do that. As the applicant states in 2.5 of their submission, it is important to minimize the visual impact of any development, but due to its size and mass, along with the materials selected, it will instead dominate in an unsympathetic way. Too big in mass, with a 2-story gable end that will be higher than Lynn Cottage, and with a large double garage, it is set too far forward, dominating the street scene. What is proposed is therefore contrary to policy B&D 12 of the neighbourhood plan. To be acceptable to the parish council, the development must sit further back central to the plot, be no more than 1 story in height, and no bigger than the footprint of the current building, and be in keeping with the local heritage assets that it will sit between. In conclusion, we ask the planning committee to defer their decision to allow us to work closely with the planning officers and developer to create collaboratively an acceptable proposal for a 2-bedroom affordable first home bungalow, satisfying both local and neighbourhood plan policies. Thank you.
Are there any questions or clarifications? So, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Councillor Blair. Could I just ask one question, probably a bit obvious for everybody. Could you just explain the reason? Has the developer approached you to have a discussion as a parish council to date, or the planning officers?
Not to my knowledge.
Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, Chair. So you made reference to the 2020 questionnaire survey completed as part of the draft neighbourhood plan, and you quoted the figure of 9 households saying. On the report here in front of me, on page 11 at 2.2, it says that a 3-bedroom house would meet a need and aspiration as identified in the results of the 2020 questionnaire, completed as part of the plan. For 57% of respondents from Burton Lazars, 3-bedroomed houses was a top priority. You didn't mention that.
So in terms of the questionnaire, 56% of respondents in the 2020 questionnaire wanted no development in the neighbourhood plan at all. And there is desire amongst some people to have up to 6 new windfall social dwellings to be built. However, it should be noted that 69.5% said that they thought the requirement was for bungalows, followed by 2-bedroom houses at 60.8%, and then 3-bedroom houses at 58.7%, and 4-bedroomed and larger houses at 28.6%. So by far more people wanted 2-bedroom bungalows.
Thank you. One or both of those statements would appear to be somewhat ambiguous.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. Any more questions or clarifications? Councillor Holmes.
I'm a bit concerned, I hope you don't mind me asking, a bit concerned about the driveway in and next to Lynn Cottage. Lynn Cottage is such a very old property, and it looks to me as though the driveway would come right up to it. Now, it said that the planning officer said it was all in the ownership, and that seems to be right up to Lynn Cottage. Do you know whether that's, with local knowledge, do you know whether that's the case?
So I must admit, I don't know exactly where the boundary is between the two, but there is obviously the public right of way going up that in between the 2 buildings.
Could have been that the pathway, it might be split in half and the rest of it belonged to the right of way and to Lynn Cottage.
It's certainly worthwhile further investigation, I would have thought.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any more questions or clarifications? No? Fine. Well, thank you very much, Councillor Blewett. I'd now like to call Wayne Hickling, who's an objector. Right, Mr. Hickling, like the previous speaker, do you know how to switch the microphone? If you just touch the face, then it should come on. And you have 3 minutes, and 30 seconds before the end, the solicitor will tell you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. As and the many objectors, main reasons for objecting are as follows. Conflicts with policies SS1, 2 and 3. Burton Lazars is an unsustainable rural settlement. The applicant has provided no evidence of a proven local need. The existing structure has not been inhabited for over 10 years and therefore its replacement cannot represent a local need. The officer's report has taken one element of the neighbourhood plan survey out of context, as the full survey confirms there is no identified need for additional residential housing of this type in the village, and an overwhelming majority is against any development. Several previous applications have been rejected for similar new or replacement dwellings in Burton, the most recent of these for a far more modest bungalow on a site directly opposite the proposed site. These applications were rejected by officers and at appeal on the basis of Melton's local plan. There are a number of similar sized houses available and frequent for sale in the village. The proposed dwelling is of a type with which the borough is well stocked, and given its close proximity to the forthcoming Melton South development will certainly mean there is no need to create one more in the vicinity. Conflicts with policies EN 6, 13 and D1. The height of the proposed two-storey house will have a significant impact on the street scene and setting compared to the modest existing single-storey structure. Its built form will be clearly visible from all directions on New Road, and the modernised entrance will intrude on the visible gap in the street frontage. This will have a detrimental impact on the settlement character, which goes against policies EN 6 and D1. The character of New Road at this location is defined by two of the oldest buildings in the village, the old schoolhouse and Lynn Cottage, which is a locally listed heritage asset and only predated by the church. The proposed two-storey house sits in the middle of these two important buildings, would be of a substantially increased size and with a design and selection of materials not sympathetic to either building. This neither protects or enhances the setting and the heritage assets, nor does it make a positive contribution to the character and distinctiveness of the local area, which goes against policy EN 13. Objectors have several other concerns, of which the following are examples. The scale, design, appearance, location of the proposed development will have a significant negative impact on the visual amenity of the old school, Lynn Cottage, and importantly, regular users of the public right of way, and no plans have been provided on landscaping to mitigate this. The proposed development has moved out of the current structure's footprint and into the adjacent pasture, which forms part of an important open green space in the heart of the village, which our neighbourhood plan is seeking to protect. This pasture also contains important utility services running through it, providing water and sewerage to local residents, yet there seems to be no mention of these or how they will be dealt with in the application. This is of great concern to potentially impacted residents. In conclusion, we would ask that this application be revised to address the concerns of residents and provide a more appropriate dwelling that meets local needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hickley. If you just stay there for a second, are there any questions or anything from anybody? Mr. Hickley? No? Well, thank you very much indeed for your presentation. I'd now like to call Chris Jesson, who's from the Planning and Design Group, the agent, to come and join the table, please. Good evening. As I've already said, you will have 3 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, members of the Planning Committee. This evening, I'm Chris Jesson, Associate at Planning and Design Group with the agents on this particular application. The officer's report before you represents a fine professional judgment, the result of the carefully considered balancing exercise necessary in such circumstances. What is clear, however, in this proposal is that the presumption in favour of replacement dwellings is held in high regard in planning policy terms. While the development proposes a 3-bedroom detached dwelling, it is worth remembering that the demolition of the existing structures includes both existing property and an associated ancillary structure, and that's worth bearing in mind in the consideration of the application and consideration of floor space. The proportionate increase is therefore less than substantial, and we concur with the officer's professional judgment before you tonight. Nor are we creating an additional dwelling, and therefore very little in the way of additional impacts are being tested. The proposal does not result in a significant increase in pressure on local infrastructure and services or less sustainable pattern of development over and above the existing situation. Contrary, the new 3-bedroomed house would meet a need and aspiration as identified in the most up-to-date results that we have available to decide before us today, being the Rural Housing Needs Survey. Within this, the specified need for 3-bedroomed houses is a top priority. We've heard that from the neighbourhood plan survey as emerging as well. The planning process seeks to deliver a balance of differing needs. The proposal, according to the emerging evidence, is one of those needs, and we have to balance those, and the 3-bedroom proposal meets a significant proportion of those needs. The 2-storey dwellings are also predominant housing context in this area. The current site in Burton Lazars does not offer a positive contribution towards the street scene in the way that the new development, set back in its traditional style, harnessing local materials, which we're happy to support enhancements of those in the way that this is being conditioned, seeks to deliver in respect of local non-designated heritage assets. The neighbourhood plan considerations are draft, are not made, and I draw attention to the importance of its infancy in weighing up the planning balance. Nevertheless, it has implied to support limited development in the village on vacant or underused sites. The policy compliance has been tested in the officer's report, and where a limited number of policies are considered to be in conflict, a clear exception has been proven because of the proposal being a replacement dwelling and a great improvement on the current situation, while providing the required infrastructure. We have worked hard and refined the scheme throughout the consultation process and have taken note and amended the proposal where specified. There are no other material reasons why this development cannot go ahead, and I therefore commend your officer's report in support of approving your proposal. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jesson. If you just remain there, are there any questions? Councillor Brown? Oh, Councillor Holmes, you said you were.
Can I ask the same question? Does the land where on the red, perhaps we could have that up again, this red line, does it all belong to your client? Do you know? That all the red that goes right out to Lynn Cottage?
Of the understanding of the application, in consultation with the client, the application has been submitted on that basis, yes. Yes.
So you know that it all belongs to the client?
Yes, the application has been in consultation with the client in declaring the application for. So the details on the application form are a reflection of that process, yes.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a question is, was there any reason why you didn't approach the parish council and the ward council to have a discussion?
Well, I must stress that it isn't without malice. I think the timing of the application, we spent a lot of time preparing the scheme. The timing of the neighbourhood plan recent consultation post-dates the timing at which this application was submitted. So that does have a bearing in that. It's my understanding that the landowner was not approached as part of that neighbourhood plan process either. So yeah, we're more than happy to discuss refinements to the scheme in that particular way. I think it's just a case of timing in that respect as to why that hasn't taken place.
So it's a bit, if I'm hearing you right, you'd be willing to sit down with the parish council and the ward council. I think that's what you're saying, isn't it?
I think, I mean, this reflects ourselves as a planning consultancy as well. I mean, we haven't prepared the plans. Architects, third party prepared the plans, but you know, we're a proactive firm that's willing to, you know, make the best endeavours for the scheme ahead.
Councillor Illingworth, you indicating? No? No, sorry, I thought I'd seen you. Anybody else to ask anything? No, well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Jesson. Adam, would you mind just assisting Councillor Childs with his chair? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We now have Councillor Child, who's a ward councillor, who's speaking against the application. Councillor Child.
Thank you very much, Chair. I fully support the earlier objections by the parish council and the resident on this application. Burton Lazars is identified in the Melton local plan as a rural settlement that is not served by sustainable infrastructure or services. The application, in my opinion, conflicts with policy D1, covering the raising of the standard of the design. For example, the siting and layout are not sympathetic to the character of the area. The buildings and development are not designed to reflect the wider context of the local area and respect the local vernacular without stifling innovation. And the amenity of neighbours and neighbouring properties are compromised. This proposal sits between two non-designated heritage assets listed in the draft neighbourhood plan. They are listed for a reason, because they are important assets to the village. For example, Lynn Cottage is thought to be the oldest residential property in the village and is in fact recorded in the County Historic Environment Record and appears on a map dated 1682. These assets are small in height and not obvious on the street scene. In the draft submission of the neighbourhood plan, it is stated that all dwellings shall have 2 bedrooms and be of a design and size suited to meeting the identified local housing need, and that's under BD 16E. This proposal is 2-storey and of a height sat between 2 lower properties. It will look incongruous on the street scene and detract from the setting of the 2 buildings of significance that it sits between. The separation distance between the proposal and Lynn Cottage is only 15.3 metres, and with the additional 2 metres in height is a concern. The design submitted does not relate to the immediate surroundings and would spoil the character of the area. A more sympathetic design of a single story in height and not to dominate the surrounding buildings, etc., and not be visually intrusive in such a historically sensitive part of the village and within the current footprint would be preferable. The pertinent bits of plan policy EN6 covers the settlement character. Development proposals will be supported where they do not harm open areas, which firstly contribute positively to the individual character of a settlement and contribute to the setting of historic built form and features. I feel that this proposal also conflicts with the above. For the above reasons, I would ask that members defer this application with a view to the developer working with the parish council to come up with a single-storey dwelling and of a design, layout and setting that is more sympathetic to the status of the surrounding buildings.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Child. Because I knew you were getting to the end of it, I did allow you a little extra time there. But are there any questions? Councillor Holmes.
There before, was there you've got your light on?
Yes.
I do apologise.
That's all right. There was a building of some sort
That's
there?
right. I
was
can't remember from when I was a baby till about when it was 7. But yes, when we used to do the paper round, there was always one there. Yes, and it was a very quaint building. Yes,
a little cottage or something was there?
Little wooden building. Yes.
Livable in?
Oh yes.
Yeah, but only just a little tiny.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Small 1 or 2 bed.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Childs. Sorry. Yeah.
Correctly, please. Probably about 3/4 of the way through your presentation, when you're talking about relationship with Lynn Cottage and the other side, I think I heard you saying that this is taller than those properties by a margin of 2 metres.
It's not what I said. No.
Oh,
I didn't mention that. Sorry.
I'm pleased I asked then.
Yeah.
What should I have heard?
I haven't mentioned 2 metres at all. Oh yes, I beg your pardon. when I talked about the separation distance,
Yeah, got
the
15,
proposal
yeah.
and Lynn Cottage is only 15.3. And with the additional 2 metres in height is a concern. Above
So
Lynn
it's 2
Cottage.
metres higher than Lynn Cottage?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lynn Cottage is set very low.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah. 2 metres higher than Lynn Cottage, right? It's all qualified.
Anything else for Councillor Charles? Nobody? No? Fine. Thank you very much. We can now then go to debate. I don't know who. Councillor Steadman?
Sorry, could I just have clarification? What stage is the neighbourhood plan at?
Through you, Chair, my understanding is that whilst obviously a lot of work has been done on it, it is still at a draft stage, and from dialogue with colleagues from a policy perspective, it's in process, but it wouldn't have sufficient weight to meaningfully use.
So it's not reached referendum stage yet, or pre-referendum stage?
That's my understanding.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor
The
Illingworth.
precision on that is at paragraph 324 of the report.
Illingworth.
I'm okay. Thank you, Chair. As a former two-time resident of Burton Lazars, I'm very familiar with this property. I wanted to buy it at one stage, but that didn't get anywhere. I'm a bit concerned that one or two lines are getting a bit crossed. As I read it, this 2 metres relates to, it's 2 metres higher than the existing building, but that still makes it lower than the 2 adjacent buildings. That's what I believe the report clearly states on page 14 of the report. So hopefully I've interpreted that exactly. 2 metres higher than the existing one, but still lower than the 2 adjoining. As regards impact on street scene, etc., and domination of those 2 buildings, from the view that we saw of the old schoolhouse and comparing that in its frontage, its front elevation width, this property is significantly less than that. So I really can't see how it can dominate it. Report also mentions that there's a very, very staggered frontage along New Street. I know that there are places that front doors straight off the pavement, there are faces set back halfway up the hill. There's all sorts. There's no continuity to New Street. It is a mixture of several layouts and styles. I think crucial is the fact that, maybe regrettably so, but the local plan only being at draft simply cannot carry sufficient weight to counteract the arguments, if you like, or propositions that officers have put forward to, and the amount of our made plan and supplementary planning document that it accords with. Similarly, on the access, I don't know whether councillors noticed, but that has been vehicular access, albeit it's somewhat overgrown at the moment. It may only look like a footpath, but I believe that access already serves Lynn Cottage. I believe they park to the rear of their cottage using that track. So this is not a new entrance that's being created, not a new access. It's already there. It's just going to be made better as part of this development. And it's already been conceded to drop the 2 metre width footpaths to get rid of the urban look and maintain the look. So as regards the green space, I saw the map with the several green, and my view of that little finger being included in the building plot is that in the overall scheme of things, that's no great loss in itself. It has no amenity value as it stands. It's a tail end of an overgrown paddock, with the greatest of respect. In fact, there's an awful lot of people I suspect don't even know there are any green paddocks behind there. I didn't at first. So all things considered, I don't have a problem with this, and I believe that the officers have come to a perfectly correct and balanced and well-considered view. I wouldn't like to see it deferred any longer. I don't believe we can attempt to encourage or impose that it be a affordable house, because we know what the rules are on that: less than 10 and they don't have to do any. So for one replacement building, I don't think we can prescribe what it is. We can only judge what is proposed. And as for the 57% of the population or responders to the survey, we can all play about with numbers, and it's other numbers were thrown in, but it does state quite clearly, and I presume our officers have extracted that correctly, 50% in favour of 3-bedroomed, and 3-bedroomed is the identified local need. So I'm not going to propose now, because I don't think it's right before there's been any more debate, but I would be happy to propose after the debate has continued. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah, thank you. I think what I'm hearing tonight is I don't think there's anybody objecting to a house going on the site. I think what we're probably seeing is a little bit of democracy not happening in the right way that it should do. So I'm hearing tonight from the objectors, the parish council, the ward councillor, and also the agent, the developer, saying that actually they'd all be willing to sit down to get this one right. And that's very important, because what's the point in having local communities, local democracy, etc. I don't think it's anyone's fault. I think it's just timing, etc. So I do think, I hardly ever go for deferral. Everybody knows that. But I think in this occasion, for local democracy, for transparency, etc., and to give the developer that chance to work with the parish council, I'm going to recommend deferral of this so that we go away, get it right. Everybody knows my view. I do that with my own parish councils, etc. So could I ask, please, for a seconder on that?
Councillor Steadman indicated that she would second that.
I think Councillor Brown's just taking the words out of my mouth there. Yeah, you've got the ward councillor, the parish councillor asking for more dialogue. I have actually read their draft neighbourhood plan, and they do go into a lot of detail onto the design, materials, etc., that they want in their village. I know it's not carrying any weight, but I think they deserve an opportunity to have the dialogue. Obviously, the agent's willing to as well, to come to a compromise. I don't think you're going to get something on the same footprint that's going to meet the modern needs of people, but I think there's a good compromise to be had there if given the opportunity. So yes, I'm happy to second that. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we've had a proposal and it's been seconded for deferral. So before we can carry on with any debate, we have to have a vote on that. So can I have a show of hands who would vote in favour of a deferral? 10. Is that correct? Yeah. Thank you. So we've had 10 votes in favour of deferral, and any against? 1 against. Thank you. Councillor Holmes, you wish to say something?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I did ask about the history of the place, and it was a little 2-bedroom house. Now, all right, we can say affordable houses and we can say all these things, but quite frankly, I would like to think that maybe it's a 2-bedroom bungalow, because Lynn Cottage is a bit special. And I really think that we don't want to, not exactly overshadow, but we'll be quite close. And I would like to have thought that it could be some partial stone, because that's what Lynn Cottage is, and actually just fit in with the area. And it needn't necessarily be for affordable houses need it. It might be somebody who wants a much smaller house.
It can't be an affordable house because it's only one.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, people are saying that probably just a cheap house or something. Well, it needn't be, need it? It can be a 2-bedroomed, nice house that somebody wants to go from a bigger house in, because there are quite a few in the village, and I just think would like, obviously, the everybody hopefully in the village, parish council, the councillor for the village, everybody will talk together. But wouldn't it be nice to have something that really fits in with Lynn Cottage? When you've got something so old, it would be lovely to have something that totally fits in. And so I hope that that's what happens. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Illingworth.
Yes, I appreciate Councillor Holmes' fondness for stone. The only comment I would make is that we talked about the setting and it's sitting between two. Well, it's sitting between a brick built on the left and a stone cottage on the right. Which one do you want it to blend in with?
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. Was there anybody else got any more comments? Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We keep talking about design at this council, and then we get an application coming forward like this, which to me is going to stick out like a sore thumb. We've got to be sympathetic to what we've got. I was talking to somebody last night who lives in Long Bennington. They've got similar problems to what we've got in Bottisford, overdevelopment. And she made the point, and actually her late husband was a councillor here in the 1990s. And she made the point, which I thought was very good, that we should preserve what we've got and we should build things that don't stand out like a sore thumb. They've got instances like that in Long Bennington where people have managed to get, or she called it garden grabbing, and people are putting monstrosities up on it and they're totally out of character with what else is there. And to me, and this is my own personal view, this is what this application is. And I would like to, I agree with Councillor Brown, we must go back and we must try and thrash this out and get something that fits in with what's already there, not put something that's going to stick out like a sore thumb. Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody's finished commenting, have you? Right, well, it's it's been proposed, it's been for deferral, that will stand. So I would just like to say that thank you all for attending. Thank you for your contributions to our meeting. And I'd like to declare the meeting now closed.